Aggression-based matchmaking in ARCRaiders is actually genius, and I am going to explain why. But before we begin, I feel it is important to clear up a bit of a misunderstanding. You see, the CEO of Embark Studios, Patrick Sutherland, has recently confirmed that aggression-based matchmaking does exist in ARCRaiders. Naturally, this has become a huge talking point across the community right now. However, people seem to be overlooking another key feature that Patrick Sutherland confirmed exists within ARCRaiders' matchmaking system, and that is skill-based matchmaking. You see, I'm seeing a lot of opinions talking about how aggression-based matchmaking is worse or better than skill-based matchmaking. But in reality, what we are dealing with right now in ARCRaiders is a conjunction of the two. We haven't just got aggression-based matchmaking, nor have we just got skill-based matchmaking. We actually have a trifecta of aggression-based matchmaking, skill-based matchmaking, and personnel or team-size matchmaking, such as solo, duo, or trios. This means that when talking about aggression-based matchmaking, it is important to discuss it in the context of skill-based matchmaking as well, as this isn't a standalone feature. So, with that out of the way, let's break down why aggression-based matchmaking, on top of skill-based matchmaking, in a game such as ARCRaiders, is actually an incredibly clever feature if implemented correctly. Most people can understand the benefit or the necessity of skill-based matchmaking. Essentially, at a high level, it ensures that your gamer dad, who only gets to play 2 to 3 hours a week, is not being put into the same lobbies as AIMKey, for example. But skill-based matchmaking does not come without its drawbacks, particularly in a game such as ARCRaiders, where there isn't actually a ranked system. You see, skill-based matchmaking can turn fun, casual play into constant high-pressure matches. It prioritizes mechanical balance, but overlooks enjoyment factors, which in the long run can lead to burnout and reduced playability. Imagine a use case where you have a player who is highly mechanically gifted, but is relatively passive in terms of PvP engagement. In situations where PvP is forced upon them, they're going to have a relatively higher win rate and an accommodatingly high extraction rate. In a matchmaking system where skill-based matchmaking is the core component, this player is going to be very likely put into a lobby of aggressive PvPers, as they will be equivalent on skill, which will be the only metric used for comparison, but they aren't equivalent in terms of passiveness. This is a problem, as it can force a skilled but casual player into an overly competitive, highly pressurized environment, which doesn't really align with the full reality of their playstyle. Now, let's imagine the opposite. Imagine you have a player who isn't quite so mechanically gifted, but is extremely aggressive. In a system where skill-based matchmaking is the only comparison metric, they will be likely put into a low elo lobby, which will run the risk of placing them amongst players that simply don't engage in much PvP or are quite passive players. This is a problem, because this is the exact mechanism that breeds extra campers. Now, let's apply aggression-based matchmaking to each of these two use cases. Aggression-based matchmaking tracks additional metrics, such as overall damage dealt to players, or frequency of PvP engagement. In the case of the mechanically gifted pacifist, this increases the likelihood that they will be paired with like-minded foes, which can enable skilled PvE fans to raid peacefully, even against players of equal skill. And conversely, if you apply the aggression-based matchmaking logic to the mechanically handicapped aggressor, this will increase the likelihood that rather than being put into PvE or largely passive lobbies, they will more likely than not be put into aggressive lobbies where they can encounter the PvP they are looking for. To summarize, aggression-based matchmaking brings some core benefits. It empowers player agency compared to traditional skill-based matchmaking, letting PvP lovers thrive without forcing it on casuals. This can boost retention in the long run, as nobody feels that sweaty lobbies are completely unavoidable. In other words, it creates an environment where two very distinct playstyles can enjoy the same game together. If you want more chilled PvE casual lobbies, you can simply refrain from engaging in PvP for a while, and those lobbies you shall receive. Conversely, if you're like me and PvP is one of the main factors for playing ARCRaiders, then simply engage in PvP, and those lobbies you shall receive. This is proving to be a successful system, as ARCRaiders are seeing consistently high growth in their player base, even 2 months after launch. It simply keeps players engaged for longer and reduces the chance of passive casuals being abused by PvP-hungry demigods. But it wouldn't be fair of me to just sit here and list the pros of aggression-based matchmaking without talking about some potential downsides or some possible ways to abuse or game this system. And this brings us on to use case number 3. Imagine a player who is decently skilled at the game and plays a good number of hours. Imagine they have done the expedition and they're trying to grind back up their workbenches and their stash value. Due to their skill and their frequency of engagement in PvP before the wipe, let's assume they are in a aggressive lobby. This simply isn't ideal in most cases if you just want to farm materials or achieve trial points. It is objectively easier to get out of a raid alive with all of the materials you need and the trials points earned if you avoid PvP altogether. As a result of this knowledge, certain players have been consciously gaming the system, avoiding PvP for 3 to 10 raids to forcibly place themselves into passive or PvE environments, enabling them to farm the high loot and otherwise high risk areas with essentially zero risk. So, why is this a problem? Well, at face value, it basically means that players who purposefully game the system have an advantage compared to those who don't. They can essentially enter PvE mode for a week, farm all of the materials and ingredients they need, craft 4 to 5 level 4 Tempests, and then get back into PvP lobbies and have an advantage. But if we think about this practically, how much of an issue really is it? Isn't this just another example of player agency? What if you have a player who has enjoyed PvP for the longest time, but has grown sick of it and wants to transition to a more casual or passive playstyle? Shouldn't they be allowed to do that rather than being forcibly stuck or trapped in an intense, overly competitive PvP environment? Not to mention that they can farm as many Tempest 4s as they like, but as soon as they return to PvP lobbies, the order of averages will eventually have its effect. These Tempest 4s will eventually land in the hands of the most deserving, aka the most skilled. So aren't they essentially just farming the weapons for players that would earn them anyway? Additionally, if they truly are a PvP player at heart, they will only be able to game the system for so long. I give them 5 to 10 passive raids before they're itching in boredom with the lack of PvP or excitement in their raids. It's only true casuals or passive players that will be able to persist in these PvE lobbies for any real length of time. Personally, I think aggression-based matchmaking is the secret ingredient that most extraction shooters have been missing for a long while. It is a key reason why ARCRaiders has been seeing so much success for the past 2 months. It effectively allows a magnitude of different playstyles to play and enjoy the same game. This has been unheard of in previous situations. I mean, look at Tarkov, for example. The more casual players in Tarkov were filtered out extremely quickly. to the point where Tarkov literally had to develop a second game and release a PvE only version of the entity. This has completely fragmented the community, as it emphasizes that PvE and PvP players in Tarkov are quite literally playing different games. Aggression-based matchmaking in ARCRaiders seems to be dealing with this conundrum perfectly. We have got an environment that caters to every single possible different playstyle, and it is the reason that we are seeing such a high concurrent number of players, even 2 months after release. Embark are ensuring that they are not pigeonholing themselves in any one specific genre of player, and therefore they are maximizing their target audience, which from a purely business perspective is nothing but good, and from the perspective of the player will just result in more patches, more updates, and more content. And regardless if you're an aggressive player or a passive player, more content and more funding is an objectively good thing. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found the value in my content today. And as always, see you in the next one.